Today's topic, what is balanced dog training? Now, at its heart, it's very simple. The idea of balanced dog training is that you teach with positive reinforcement, you teach with a series of rewards, praise, treats, toys, whatever, and through time, once the dog understands right from wrong, then you would phase in a correction or some sort of consequence if they choose to disobey. So that's it at its heart. And when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. So think about humans, and I guess let me back up a second. In a perfect world, it'd be cool if we never had to correct a dog, right? That'd be great if we never, ever had to give a correction, but that's not real life. And, now let's talk about humans for a moment. How great would it be if we lived in a world without consequences, right? A world where no one ever got in trouble, no one ever did the wrong thing, and there didn't have to be a series of, penalties or consequences, for doing the wrong thing. That'd be awesome, obviously, but that's not the world we live in, right? We have speeding tickets. Why? Because people know the rules and still sometimes choose to go too fast. And the thought is, hey, it's worth it, right? I want to go fast today. We also have jails, right? And there's, a lot of crimes committed on a daily basis. People make mistakes, right? And they're not perfect. So I think pretty much everyone, I would hope, watching this video is in agreement that people need some sort of consequences when they break the rules. Dogs, same thing, right? To live in a world of no consequences is insane. That's absolute chaos, so we can't have that. So the idea of balanced dog training is that we take our time, we teach right from wrong, and through time we have a fair series of consequences or, punishments, corrections, whatever you want to call them. Now, we're going to talk a lot today about what those consequences should look like, because that's important, because without a doubt, there's reasonable consequences and there are unreasonable. And examples in the human world would be if someone is speeding, a reasonable consequence is a ticket, right? And they get in a small amount of trouble. An unreasonable consequence would be 30 years in prison, right? We have to have a reasonable consequence. So we're going to talk about that in the context of dog training. But first, I want to spend a minute just talking about the science of dog training. Some of these terms I guarantee you've heard before, but also I would guess some of them you've probably been taught wrong. Even if you look it up online, you'll see a lot of misinformation out there. So first, we're going to talk about B.F. Skinner and operant conditioning. Now, operant conditioning, we're going to talk about this. It sounds extremely complex. At the end of the day, it's actually very simple, once you think about it, but I want you to understand all the terms that are out there. So operant conditioning breaks down into 4 quadrants, and you've probably heard, of course, positive reinforcement, but there's more than that. There's negative reinforcement, there's positive punishment, and there's negative punishment. So let's talk about all of those. Positive reinforcement, it's pretty obvious, right? And, I think everyone knows this one. It's something good, right? But let's talk about why it's called positive reinforcement. Positive does not mean something good. So in these 4 quadrants here, positive is not good and negative is not bad. Could be good, could be bad, but that's not their meaning. Positive means you're adding something into the equation. Negative means you're taking it away. So if we start with positive reinforcement, the idea is you are adding something into the equation, some sort of stimuli, something in order to reinforce a behavior that the dog just performed. So then in that scenario, the positive would be something good because the idea that you're adding something in to reinforce the behavior. Classic example would be a treat or a pat on the head. You tell the dog sit, they do. You say, who's a good boy? You scratch their ears. You've now reinforced the behavior. It's more likely to happen in the future. So that's a pretty easy one. Now, people often think, now I guess let me give you like a little quiz here. I want you to think in your mind about the opposite of positive reinforcement. What is that? So not just the words, but I want you to think about what does it look like? What's happening? So picture someone giving their dog the opposite of positive reinforcement. They told him to sit, they didn't. So what's the opposite? So in your mind, my guess would be you're seeing some sort of correction, right? Someone telling the dog no, or a tug on a leash or something, right? Or saying, hey, no, you're supposed to sit. You're picturing something like that, right? So I think very often when people hear that and they think correction, right away they think, well, opposite of positive reinforcement must be negative reinforcement, right? But that's really not true. So the stuff you're picturing in your mind right there is actually positive punishment. And I want you to think about it. There, if you think about someone saying no or someone giving a little tug on the leash, they're adding something into the equation. They're not taking it away, right? They're adding something in, which would be the positive, in order to punish the behavior or make it less likely to happen in the future. So that's what positive punishment is. You're adding something in to hopefully make a dog less likely to perform a certain action. Negative reinforcement is tossed around a lot. And a lot of people will call us originally and say, hey, I've heard positive reinforcement's good, and I don't really want to do that negative reinforcement stuff. And we spend some time educating them. Negative reinforcement, the idea is you're taking something away in order to reinforce a behavior, right? So a negative reinforcement is not that correction that you generally think of. It means you're taking something away to reinforce a behavior. Best example I can give you would be leash pressure. Your dog is pulling on a leash gets tight, there's pressure, not super enjoyable. When they turn towards you, when they stop pulling, that's a behavior you want to reinforce, the leash pressure goes away. So your dog learns they can turn it off, right? They can stop pulling, and now, when they stop pulling, the leash pressure goes away. And now that behavior is reinforced, more likely to happen again. The one we haven't talked about so far is negative punishment. So you can probably figure this one out if you just kind of think about it for a minute. But negative punishment would be we're taking something away in order to punish a behavior, in order to make it, less likely to happen. So couple examples here. One would be, this one doesn't work well at all, but the dog is doing something wrong and the person says, okay, you're running around barking with your toy. Don't like that at all. I'm going to take your toy away to make you less likely to bark when you have it. There's your negative punishment. Another example would be, sometimes people will have a treat up and the dog jumps, so then they put the treat behind their back. The idea is this went away in order to punish that behavior of jumping. Negative punishment can work with a dog, but I don't want you to overthink it because dogs are not people, right? So humans are able to make these really complex decisions, and we're able to make these complex decisions and complex connections. So we can say, hey, this just happened to me, and it might be because of this, but it could also be this, or it could be the interplay of these two things over here. Dogs don't do that, right? They're in that moment, they make a quick judgment right away about, why something happened. So if you try to take something away from a dog in order to punish another behavior, the odds of that working are very slim. Now with a human, it works great, right? I have 3 kids. My youngest is an 8-year-old boy. If he did something wrong, let's say fake example here, this never happens. Let's say he left his bike right behind my truck, right? So I go to back up and there's a bike there. I don't like that, right? The bike's going to get crushed if that continues. So now we could say, hey, buddy, I'm taking away your Nintendo Switch. You're not going to have it for 2 days. Want to know why? Because you left your bike behind my truck again, and it could have been crushed, and luckily I saw it in time. And he's able to process and say, okay, got it, right? He might not love the decision, but he's going to understand why it happened. With a dog, if we're taking away freedom, or we're taking away food, or we're taking away toys with the idea that they're going to make some other connection, that can be a challenge. So I want you to really make sure that your corrections always, or your punishment, whatever you're using, always makes sense to the animal and it's clear. So now let's talk about, now that we know what operant conditioning is, we know these 4 quadrants, let's talk about how we use it. So there's something out there called force-free dog training. And force-free training is the idea that we'll never use a correction. And it's, beautiful in theory, right? Who wants to ever correct? So the idea is you'll never correct a dog, you'll teach them right from wrong, and then they'll never be bad again. We get hundreds and hundreds of clients every single year that have tried force-free training for 2 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, and I'll get more into that later. They've tried it for a long period of time and it just kind of doesn't work for them and they need something else. So let's talk about the challenges there. With force-free training, the dog never learns a consequence. So a force-free trainer will say, anyone who corrects a dog is a correction trainer or a dominance trainer or an aversive trainer. And they'll have all these, fancy words to kind of say this, anyone who corrects is bad. But I think we already know from earlier in the video from the human component or human example that corrections make sense from time to time. Let me give you another example, for your dog. So picture your dog runs across the street. And this is not a puppy. Let's say he's a year old. He knows come. You've been training him. He's really good at it. And he runs across the street and you tell him not to. And he sprints. Car almost hits him. He runs in front of it. And he's jumping on the neighbor kids, scratching them, trying to take a sandwich out of their hand. And the kids bawling and crying. What do you do when you get over there? What do you do, right? Do you get over there and say, oh man, well, this isn't good. Okay, well, I guess I'll just take you home now and take the dog home and that's it? Or do you want your dog to actually learn that's not allowed, right? You could have died crossing that street. This is dangerous, right? You cannot be jumping on children. That's dangerous as well. You cannot steal food. My guess is you'd probably want to give some sort of correction, right? And the correction can be as simple as a stern no. If that means something to your dog, that can be enough. It could be grabbing their collar and saying, hey, no, you cannot do this, right? And taking them back across the street. That's a correction as well. I would guess that most likely you would do something like that, right? You want your dog to understand there's a penalty for this. So sometimes force-free trainers will try to position anything that, involves a correction as being harsh, right? And they'll give you these examples of like, yelling and screaming and whatever. I mentioned at the start of this video, some corrections are good, some are bad, right? And we can spend a minute talking about that. So not every correction is good. I'd be the first to admit that. So I think corrections have a place in dog training, but they have to be reasonable. So let's say, I'll give you an example. Let's say you brought an 8-week-old puppy home and you've had him home for an hour and he pees on the rug, and you turn and look at him and you make stern eye contact and you say, no, sternly. I would say that correction, 100% inappropriate. Not fair to the dog. It's going to scare him. There's a chance it terrifies him, and it's not reasonable, right? He doesn't know not to pee in the house. So right there, I would say that's inappropriate, not because the correction hurt him, right? There's nothing physical there, but a correction can also be a problem mentally, right? The goal is not to scare a puppy for peeing in the house the first time they do it, right? So anytime we're thinking about corrections, we need to be clear. There are good corrections and there are bad corrections, and we have to teach first. So that at its heart is the start of balanced training, is teaching. And we use positive reinforcement. So when we're teaching a dog to sit, come, whatever we're working on, we're going to use lots of praise. And we also use treats. That depends on the dog and depends on the trainer. So I'm not a huge treat-based trainer. I really work hard to use praise instead of treats. And the reason is I just love the connection that builds between me and the dog. Now, there are times I'll use treats. Fearful dog, absolutely. Or 8-week-old puppy, a lot of times they're not tuned into praise yet, so we'll use treats for something to get their attention. But generally speaking, I want my dog to work for my praise, right? Me scratching their ear, petting them, telling them they're a good boy. It can be a little bit harder that way to get the results, but to me it's absolutely worth it because you always have your praise with you, right? You always have that. You don't always have a treat. So either way, we start with positive reinforcement, right? We're praising what we like, we're teaching. Through time, once we determine, hey, this dog knows right from wrong and they've chosen to break the rules, whatever they are, we need some sort of consequence. And there's so many consequences we could have, right? One of the easiest ones is no. That's an aversive. An aversive just means anything the dog doesn't like, right? No is a correction, consequence, aversive, punishment, any of those things. Could also be a tug on the leash. It could be many different things. The idea is it's appropriate for your dog, right? That it's the right level for your dog and it makes sense. Now, the reason we, very much believe dogs need consequences, same with humans, is some dogs will never make the right decision without it, right? If there's something positive and the idea is, okay, you get a treat if you come, some dogs, that treat might always be the best thing in the world. Cool. That's awesome, right? If they'll always come to the treat and you have no problems and you always have treats on you, that's great. Yeah, problem solved, right? But in real life, we get many, many clients who come to us with a dog who understands what come means, but there's never been a consequence. And they're out, in a field and the owner calls them and they look at him and they're like, yeah, I don't want a treat. I want this squirrel. And boom, they're gone. That's a big problem, right? At some point in time, the vast majority of dogs will need a consequence. We also see a lot of problems with when there's no consequence. A lot of times force-free trainers will give you this like working program that just takes forever. So an example would be when a dog is behaving improperly on leash. We see it a lot with reactivity. Dog is barking, lunging, growling on leash. So the force-free trainer will say, well, we need to first, we have to reprogram your dog the way they feel around dogs. So I don't want them to see a dog for 6 months. And a lot of people say, okay, done, we'll do that, right? So they don't have their dog around a dog for 6 months. Then they'll say, okay, now when you're around a dog, they need to be way under a threshold, so I want you to have really good treats, and you need to be so far away your dog's not reacting. For some dogs, that's 10 or 20 blocks, right? Like hundreds of yards away. So now they're working with the dog, and they say, you do that for a month or so, then check back in with me, and then we'll get a little bit closer. And we've had clients come to us where this is a multi-year process. I'm trying to think of a nice way to say this, but think how long your dog lives, right? 10, 12, 14 years if you're lucky. Do you want 2 years of their life to be spent messing around with maybe one day I can walk them around another dog? That's not realistic. That's not real life, right? That's a place where I would step in and say, we need a correction here. Now, correction is not code word for beating the dog, right? Correction is not screaming at the dog. Correction is that. It's breaking focus. It can be a quick tug on the leash. It can be a voice. We need to figure out what works for the dog, but we need a series of corrections. And corrections are not just in that scenario, let your dog go to the other dog and then correct them when they're bad, right? It's a series of breaking their focus. So I might start 10 blocks from the other dog, But 20 minutes later, I'm at 9 blocks, 8, 7 within an hour. We're very close to that other dog. We're making a lot of progress with the idea that your dog needs to learn there's a consequence. And most dogs that are reactive on leash are not that fearful, and they're not Cujo. They don't want to kill the other dog. They're just overexcited. They don't know how to calm themselves down. It can be fixed very quickly. So that's an example of a time that I do see clients coming to us after a year or two, and it's absolutely crazy, and we're able to fix it pretty fast. But we also see just your average, sweet little puppy that has grown up to be a dog who's 10 months old that has no boundaries in his life, and they haven't learned to not jump because the owner turns their back, or they, move the treat away. And some dogs that might work for, some it doesn't. The dog never learns consequences, and it becomes a huge problem. And now what we see is these people that have started with force-free training with the idea that I love my dog, right? So I could never ever correct them. Now they don't like their dog's behavior. They're frustrated by their dog, right? When company comes over, they put their dog away. When they go for a walk, it's not fun because the dog is pulling like crazy, on their harness or whatever it is they're using. And now life is not fun with the dog. Is that loving your dog? I would say no. So these decisions that can be made in a good way at first, right? Where we think, I love this creature so I could never, ever, ever discipline, now turn into ruining the dog's life and ruining your life. And you have this kind of butting of heads, right? That's not good. And now people don't enjoy their lifestyle with their dog, and their dog doesn't get much freedom. To me, ultimate freedom is being off leash and a dog being allowed to run, right? And if your dog is untrained, if there aren't a series of consequences, they can't do that. And that makes me so sad, right? A dog is made to run, right? Maybe not an English bulldog or a pug. I'm picturing those in my head, but and they still need free time as well. That was kind of a joke, but a dog is made to run, right? We have these working animals, and they're made to run. They need the chance to do that. And if they don't have consequences, it becomes very, very hard for it. So the whole idea of balance training is just thinking through what makes sense for your dog, teaching them right from wrong, and then instituting some sort of corrections later on. Now, when you look for a balance trainer, or any trainer, first, I guess decide, do you like the idea of corrections? Or is your thought, hey, I would never correct my child. If my 5-year-old child is throwing food across the room, I'll just turn my back and ignore them because I don't want to stop them. If that makes sense to you, then I would absolutely choose force-free training. Or if you might go up to your child and say, hey, you're 5. You cannot do this. That is inappropriate. You're not going to watch TV later, right? Or, I'm going to take the food away for a few minutes, and when you calm down, you can have your SpaghettiOs back or whatever it is they're eating. If you would do that, that sounds a lot more like balance training. But you need to find a trainer that makes sense for you. So balance trainers are on a spectrum, just like anybody else, right? Some people are going to be too rough. Some are not rough whatsoever. Some are right in the middle. You should not be rough and mean with your dog, right? So if your trainer's like, hey, we've got to show your dog who's boss right away, and they're intimidating you and intimidating the dog, that's a problem, right? That's not what balance training is about. It's about teaching the dog a series of rewards and corrections, if they do the wrong thing, but it should not be harsh or scary. That is it for today. I hope this was helpful to you. If you have questions on balance training or any type of training, reach out, drop us a comment. We would absolutely love to help you with your dog.